welcome back. Today I have a video on bacteria versus virus. What's the difference? Have you ever wondered what the difference between a virus and a bacteria is? Well, today in this video we're going to go ahead and get straight into the differences, and also later on we'll discuss some of the similarities. But let's jump right into it. First thing that's important to recognize is that the viruses are actually smaller than bacteria. Even the largest virus is smaller than the smallest bacterium. Important thing to realize is that bacterium are definitely more complex than viruses. If you think about it like this, viruses aren't even a full cell. Instead, they're just made of some genetic material like DNA or RNA, and it's housed inside of a protein coating. They can't live outside of a living cell for very long. It's kind of like when you hear about when the virus is on a countertop and they don't live for a very long period, they live for short periods of time. They need a living host, like a person or animal, to carry on and to also reproduce itself. Moving on to the next big difference, and this kind of leads into that exactly, is that bacteria, they are considered a one-celled organism. Bacterium is made up of one cell, and they come in a lot of shapes and different sizes, and they can live and reproduce on their own without a host. And so this is a big difference between the virus and the bacteria, is that the virus needs a host, whereas the bacteria does not. The virus needs a person or an animal so that the virus can multiply itself. Viruses attached to the host cell, it's kind of like if you had somebody breaking into someone else's home and trying to take over. A virus uses the host cell, then it basically reprograms and rewires the host cells to make more of the virus. And sometimes once the virus is done with the host cell, then it kills off the actual host cell. It's kind of like the bad guy coming in and robbing someone's house and then killing the owners of the house afterwards. That sounds terrible, right? Important difference to recognize is that most viruses cause disease, whereas most bacteria are actually harmless. And in fact, less than 1% of bacteria can actually make you sick, aka pathogenic bacteria. Many times, bacteria can actually help your body function. One great example of that is actually in the digestive system. Viruses are typically on a mission and have a very specific area of the body that they like to attack. For instance, some like to attack specifically the respiratory system. Another major difference between a virus and a bacteria is that antibiotics don't treat viruses, they treat bacteria. One thing that I do want to mention is, and that I think is very important to mention, is that not all antibiotics cover for every bacteria. It's not like you just can throw an antibiotic at someone no matter what bacteria it is. It does need to be specific to that bacteria. Viruses are usually prevented with vaccinations if available, and also antivirals. Antivirals can actually slow or stop the multiplication of the virus. And the final difference that I want to point out between a bacteria and a virus before we jump into the similarities is that bacteria can actually live in a variety of different environments. They're much more stable and they thrive in a lot of different kinds of conditions, whereas viruses, that is not always the case. Bacteria, it can live in dirt, on keyboards, in heat, when it's wet or dry. They can be very stable in a variety of conditions, just as mentioned. Viruses, they are very susceptible to any kind of varying conditions, and they do not thrive well, and they do not survive very easily. Specifically, if you think about when we hear, you hear about viruses, how long they last on doorknobs or counters, and that, they'll last for a short period of time. That's a great example of that. Now let's jump right into the similarities between the two. The first one is the symptoms. Both viruses and bacteria can cause similar symptoms depending on what we're looking at. It can be fever, chills, myalgias, which is aka muscle aches, coughing, sneezing, sore throat. A lot of times they will have very similar symptoms. Another similarity between viruses and bacteria is that they both can cause similar type of diagnoses. including pneumonia, sinus infection, meningitis, gastroenteritis, bronchitis, and rashes. These are just a few examples. Now, how they're treated is really the big difference. One thing to understand about bacteria is that they are adaptive. From antibiotics over time, overuse can actually cause some resistance. Like, for instance, when an antibiotic, when they're given and an individual really just has a virus, this can lead to antimicrobial resistance. And eventually the antibiotics won't work. It is important to remember the ABCs of preventing antimicrobial resistance. Ask and assess if the antibiotic is necessary. Along with this, your provider, whoever you're seeing, can assess you to determine if the antibiotic is really necessary. Do you need the antibiotic to overcome the illness? B, for bacteria only, antibiotics don't kill viruses, as mentioned before. And not all antibiotics will work the same for different types of bacteria, as I mentioned this before as well. So the correct antibiotic has to be used for a very specific bacteria. And C, complete the recommended course of antibiotics that you've been prescribed. This is very, very important because you don't want to just kind of kill the bug and then create a stronger bug over time. The next similarity is that they're both contagious, or they both can be contagious, I should say, and that they spread in similar ways. Both viruses and bacteria can spread, depending on what the virus or the bacteria is, they can spread by kissing, coughing, sneezing, sexual fluid, saliva, contaminated surfaces like countertops and doorknobs. They can spread from insects. They can spread from consuming contaminated food or water, and also transmission from a mom to a baby during pregnancy and birth. Well, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please make sure to give this a thumbs up if you like these kinds of videos, and also hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can get the latest videos. Alright everyone, until next time, take care.